So in evolution and in zoology, one of the big things that we cover, as I mentioned before, is speciation. It's the evolution from one species into two or more different species. And it's definitely a result of macroevolution, but in order for it to happen, again, it must, there's two different populations that are going to become two different species must stay reproductively isolated from each other. They cannot interbreed. They start interbreeding, their genes will be mostly the same, and they're going to look and act the same. In order for them to look and act different, we cannot interbreed with each other. So there's multiple ways for that to happen. We have an idea of temporal isolation, meaning time. You're not there at the same time. If you go on a date with somebody and they show up an hour late, chances of them mating with you is probably pretty slim. So the same thing with other organisms. There's a cricket called the spring field cricket, and then there's another one called the fall field cricket. They live in the same field. One of them comes out and mates during the spring, the other one mates during the fall. They're not mating at the same time, so there's no way for them to interbreed, and over time they've become two separate species. Mechanical isolation. Sometimes the bits and pieces just don't fit together, and it prevents a species two populations from mating with each other, and that will definitely help drive the process of speciation. Ecological isolation, in other words, you just live in two different ecosystems. Tigers and lions are very closely related. They share a very close common ancestor, but they live in two different areas of the world, one in Africa, one more in India. Because they're not in the same area, they can't breed with each other, and they've become two separate species. Sometimes we have behavioral isolation. In other words, you just don't act right, and we see this all the time. Ladies, you sit back and watch guys, and they act weird, and they probably act immature, and you're like, "There's no chance I'm mating with that dude. He don't act right." That's definitely a factor whenever animals go to reproduce. In this example, you have a bird singing their song, and if a bird doesn't sing the right song, that he could behaviorally isolate himself. In other words, no females would want to mate with him because he's not singing the right song. Even if they are able to mate, everything else works out, and they're actually able to copulate, to mate with each other. And the sperm actually gets to the egg. If they're not chemically compatible, the sperm cannot enter the egg. Even though everything else is worked out, mating still doesn't occur. And this will help drive two populations to becoming two separate species. Even if they are able to mate, and the egg does go, the sperm does go into the egg, sometimes the genetics aren't compatible enough to form a viable offspring. So a tiger and a lion, as we used an example earlier, a tiger and a lion can actually breed with each other. And they form a liger. That's what Napoleon Dynamite rode around on, right? But a liger has major health issues. Most of them are stillborn. The ones that are born only live a few years and very rarely reach sexual maturity, and even if they did, they're sterile. So as a species, ligers cannot reproduce, therefore ligers are not a species. That process helps keep lions and tigers separated, and helps drive that process of speciation. But then let's say you do have two species that can interbreed and produce an offspring that doesn't have very bad health effects and can live a long, healthy life, but often they're sterile. And so that's called hybrid sterility. So a donkey and a horse can have a baby, and they're mules. That's how we get a mule. Mules are healthy. They're fine, but male mules are sterile. They cannot reproduce. The females can, but they can't reproduce with the male mule because males can't have babies. So that means as a species, well, mules are not a species. Mules are a hybrid species of donkeys and horses. So that tells us that donkeys and horses are not the same species, and that process that keeps them reproductively isolated further divides donkeys and horses into two separate species. So another big thing that we cover and that we're going to see a lot in zoology is the process of sexual selection. So this is when one gender selects a mate based on physical characteristics in that other gender. So in other words, natural selection is driven by the preference of a certain trait that's going to be found in the opposite sex. Humans do this all the time, so this is not a new concept for us. But because this process occurs, generally we see something as a result of that. We see sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism, being dimorphic, means that things look different. Sexual dimorphism means that they look different based on their gender. So not just the genitals, that's going to be an obvious thing, but for example, these peacocks, that is a male. He's all brightly colored, and on the other side you see the female. She's not brightly colored. That's two very different looks that they have, and she is going to look at his feathers when he goes into display, and he's literally peacocking, right? That's where we get the term from. So the peahen is going to look at the peacock and look at his feathers, see, is he healthy? Does he have a lot of sheen to it? Does he take good care of his feathers? How long can he keep his display going? And those are all things that she'll look for in the mate. Deer have very strong sexually dimorphic features. The presence and absence of antlers. Only males have antlers, and they're used for rutting and territorial displays. But also other features that you can use to tell that they're different with each other is look how thick the male is on his neck to be able to hold up those antlers, and how bulky he is up front. The female's a lot more dainty. She's more slim and more streamlined. Her face is more narrow. That's characteristics that are shown between males and females, and that process is driven by sexual selection to result in this sexual dimorphism that we see. We see it in other species too. Reptiles. Can you guess which one of these is the male and which one's the female? The one with the penny, the big red loop under his neck. That's the male. He used that as a territorial display for other males. He'll actually push himself up on his front legs. He'll stick that penny out. And the bigger it is, the redder it is. That is usually a warning sign to other males. Hey, I'm big and strong, and this is my area and my turf. You need to run away. And the females will generally pick males based on those characteristics, and that helps drive the evolution of the species through sexual selection. So here's another cool little example of sexual selection, just to give you some visuals. So this is one species of a bird called a bird of paradise. There's many different types, but you can probably see these two look different. And for an untrained eye, you may think these are two separate species, but this is actually the male and the female. The female is actually the brown one, and the male is the one that is black with the feathers, and he's dancing all around. He's behaving in a certain way. He's showing physical characteristics. He's going through his mating dance, and he's trying to get the female, and she's not having any of it. She flies off. You may have seen this before. These are flamingos, and this is a large group of probably mostly males, and there may be 1, 2, or 3 females in the center of this, and the males are courting the female. And the way they do this is they all obviously get together in a little clump, strut around. She looks at all of them and says, which one of you has the longest neck and has the best stamina, who can stay in this clump with us for the longest amount of time? That's the dude I'm gonna mate with. And that process driven by the female is sexual selection. Here's another one. I call this the Michael Jackson bird. I actually don't know off the top of my head the actual name of this bird, but he does a little dance. He's very brightly colored. You can see the female in the background. He spends a lot of time and energy and effort building a nest to impress the female. Then he goes around and he finds objects that are the rarest colors in nature, blues and purples, and he decorates his nest with it, because if those are hard to find and he finds a lot of them, that means he has good stamina. And usually he's pretty strong and he can help protect the nest. He then puts on a mating display and does this really cool, intricate little dance for the female. And hopefully, with all these 3 things combined, he has a chance to mate. In this particular instance, again, the female's like, nah, I ain't worth it. And she flies off looking for someone else. Poor guy. But, and you know, that's nature for you.